Ladies and gentlemen, as you heard, I'm coming from a small, independent country in Central Europe, quite a successful country. The Swiss are working hard. We feel a little bit like the Asians of Europe. The presidents of my country and the ministers, nobody knows on this planet. And yet you have invited me. Thank you very much for that. It is a great pleasure and honor for me to address a few thoughts to this distinguished audience. Ladies and gentlemen, until 9 months ago, the sky over the global economy appeared free of clouds. Now some storm clouds have gathered. The US subprime crisis has spread to additional financial market sectors. The tightening of the credit conditions and the threat of recession in the US have the potential to impact negatively on real economies, not only in the industrial countries, but certainly also in emerging markets. This crisis raises a number of interesting questions. How is it possible that top professionals suddenly make mistakes that, when you come down to it, are trivial? Why have elaborate mathematical evaluation models failed? Why could a crisis like this occur in countries that are proud on their sound financial systems, their regulatory systems, and their bank supervision, and that like giving speeches to emerging countries about how to do things the proper way? Do we need more regulation now, even better models, or do we need better people? I don't claim to know all the answers, but perhaps you will allow me, from a certain impartial distance and as a non-banker, to outline a few thoughts. I would like to begin with a few comments on the importance of financial markets today. Efficient financial markets have an important function for the economy as a whole. The liberalization of the financial markets, product innovation, and the rapid development of technology have culminated in the incredible vitality of the markets witnessed today. Thanks to the new instruments, risks can be better distributed, the cost of corporate financing are reduced, capital seeks the best investment opportunities worldwide, and is constantly discovering new entrepreneurs. This has played a substantial part in the gratifying global economic growth of the recent years. Despite the current crisis, I come to the conclusion that the broad distribution of risks has made the system more resistant, at least to smaller and medium-sized shocks. Nevertheless, global integration means that crises spread faster and can even extend to become systemic risks. What we can already state with certainty is that, in principle, the advantages of new and innovative financial market instruments outweigh the disadvantages. It would be wrong if their use or innovative further development were hindered by over-regulation as a result of this subprime crisis. I have already experienced 2 major mortgage crises in Switzerland, in my own country, whose origins led in the careless evaluation of borrower credit ratings and an over-optimistic evaluation of the real estate markets. The bursting of the dot-com bubble was preceded by disorderly analysis and imprudent purchase recommendations, while the reasons for the Asian financial crisis were to be found in serious structural shortcomings. In other words, mysterious, devilish powers leading economies down the road to ruin were never the problem. It was just simple human failure. Not only the failure of individual managers, however, but also the collective failure of people following a kind of herd instinct. What about this subprime crisis today? First of all, it seems that managers, like all human beings, become careless and complacent when things go well for too long. Once again, the mistakes they made were in essence banal, you know that, because of tempting bonuses and yields. People who could not really afford mortgages were nevertheless persuaded to sign up for them. Low initial interest rates were used as a bait. Risks were broadly distributed via securitization and thereby kept off balance sheets. This further reduced the incentive to devote sufficient care and attention to checking customer credit ratings. Paradoxically, securitized papers remain on bank books in some cases also, however, and were not distributed. Banks thus remained exposed to the full risk. In off-balance sheet special investment vehicles, long-term non-performing mortgage loans were pre-financed using cheap short-term money. The mortgages were repackaged in increasingly complex products which were purchased by investors, also in Switzerland, around the world who did not understand the products but were attracted by their yields. Everything went well as long as the interest rates were low and real estate prices continued rising. But it should have been obvious to everyone that this situation could not continue forever and that the bubble had to burst sometime. When it really did burst and the market for structured products dried up, the result was a crisis of confidence in unforeseen magnitude. Commercial banks mistrusted one another and began to hoard liquidity. Central banks were forced to work against the collapse of the system by injecting liquidity. Wealth to the billions was destroyed. Although the financial system has been able to withstand the shock so far, we cannot yet foresee the long-term costs, and they might be considerable and maybe still underestimated. Now, ladies and gentlemen, when a market falls apart at the seams and its powers of self-healing fail, people begin to clamor for more regulation. However, regulation always cuts back free spaces. Yet, if companies are to develop creativity and thereby contribute to growth, some room for maneuver is vital. Nevertheless, a market economy cannot function without regulation. We heard that from Mr. Sarbanes, even if only to make sure that all participants have access to the markets and that competition is ensured. In the financial sector in particular, regulation also helps to build confidence and thus promote growth, for instance, by setting minimum standards for risk management, industry supervision, transparency, equity, and so on. However, regulation requires a legitimate political justification, and the economic consequences must be carefully investigated by means of a cost-benefit analysis. Essentially, there are three legitimate political justifications for financial market regulations. First, protection of consumers who must be aware of risks, even in the case of complex instruments. Second, prevention of market imperfection by limiting asymmetrical information through transparency and publicity requirements. And third, ensuring the stability of the system, of the financial system. In recent years, regulatory systems have undergone radical reforms. The route taken towards risk-sensitive capital